Hi, boys and girls, it's Mrs. Mangan here. And yesterday you learned a little bit about all the various types of graphs that you can see that represent data. Today we're going to zoom in a bit more closely on a bar graph, and we're going to concentrate not on designing bar graphs, but just on how to read a bar graph. So, bar graphs use the height or the length of a bar to represent a number. Here, this table shows the number of cars that are sold by Patrick in 6 months. So, yesterday we talked about a table as a way to kind of organize your information, but it's not a graph. Graph is a more visual way of representing the data. So, here in this table, we see on the left hand side, we've got the month. We've got the 6 months of the year, the first 6 months. And on the right, we've got the number of cars that he sold with the coordinating months. So this is a nice, clean, easy way to see data, but sometimes people use graphs, so it's a bit more visual, so they can quickly interpret the data. So here is a bar graph of Stephen's car sales in the first 6 months. Took the coordinating data from that table and created a graph of it. Before we start thinking about the sales, I want to go over the parts of a bar graph. You will notice on the left hand side, there is the y axis. That has a scale on it. That tells us the intervals on how many numbers it's going to go up. So I'll notice that it ends at 20. Why did the author of this or the designer of this choose to make the scale end at 20? Well, because the highest number of car sales in 1 month was 18. So you're not going to go much higher than 18, and you're certainly not going to go lower than 18. You'll see for the scale that the designer chose to make each line represent two cars. So you'll notice 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Now, what about those months where the Stephen sells an odd number? Well, you'll notice that there's these half marks here. And these half marks here delineate halfway in between the two numbers at those lines. So 0 and 2, halfway is 1. So there are ways for us to represent 1. The designer of this could have chosen to have each line here be equal to 1 and have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But to avoid having a super tall graph, they decided to have their scale go by twos with the half line, meaning the number in between. So that is our y-axis. And depending on the data, you'll see what the y-axis is representing. So in this case, we're talking about the number of cars. So that's why it says number of cars here on the left. On the x-axis on the bottom is the months being represented by bars. So they all are down here. They have capital letters for each of the months, and then it follows the scale and coordinates with the data here. So that is our bar graph. One thing I say before we answer any questions about bar graphs are to read the graph once. What I mean by that is every single time you answer a new question, you should not have to go back and 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. If you just put the information in one time, and I'm going to take myself out of present mode, if you just put the information one time on this scale, on this graph, you'll only have to read it once. And let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to do January 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So I'm going to put in Patrick sold 18 cars in that month. Let's do February 2, 4, 6, 8. So 8 cars in February. Let's look to March 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Ooh, do you see how the designer of this graph put that dotted line for you? That's letting me know it's not quite 14. It's not all the way to 16. It's right in the middle. It's 15. You're not going to see those lines always. This is to help you practice. So pay careful attention to whether the top of the bar graph lands right on a line or in between a line. Let's look at April. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Right on a line. 10. May. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Let me double check myself. Go all the way to the left. Yep, 16. And let's do June. 2, 4. Oops, it's right in the middle. It's not quite 6 and it's over 4. So I'm going to be 5. So now every time that I answer a question, I don't have to do that process. I can just mark it down once so that I have the answers. I recommend that you do that every time you've got a pencil and paper bar graph. And even in these times where we're using it digitally, create a little shape or a text box. And when you see a bar graph, put the number on top so that you don't have to recalculate it every time you have a new question. Let's go to the next question. In which months did Patrick sell fewer than 10 cars? So I'm going to look closely. Fewer than 10. So let's go back. Let's see. I'm going to find 10 right here, and I'm looking for that word fewer than 10. Well, in April, he sold 10 cars, so that's not fewer than 10. So which 2 months are below this 10 mark? Do you see them? Yeah, they're February and June. So I'm going to write, I'm going to take a text box, or if you were writing in paper and pencil, you would write the months that Patrick sold fewer than 10 cars was, let's go back. Let me double check. Here's 10, February and June. I'm going to use capital letters. And if I'm not sure how to spell something, I'm using my right there strategies. I'm going and finding what is right there. The months that Patrick sold fewer than 10 cars were February and June. All right, let's go to the next one. How many more cars were sold in May than in April? How many more cars were sold in May than in April? So that actually reminds me of my bar modeling, right? I can take the data. Here's May and here's April. How many more were sold in May than April? So finding the difference between May, this 16, and April, this 10, what am I going to do? I'm going to do 16 minus 10, which leaves me with 6 cars. Now, when you go back to your graph, you can also see that. Let's look at May and April. If I count 2, 4, 6, you'll see the difference is 6 here on the scale between 10 and 16. Let's go to our next one. In which month were half as many cars sold as in May? So I'm going to look at May and I'm going to look which month were there half as many cars sold. So let's go find May. 16. What's half of 16? Yeah, it's 8. So which month has 8? Is February. So we would say, and I'm just going to grab a text box, that in February, half as many cars were sold than in May. Because May sold 16, and in February, he sold 8. All right? So see how we use the bar graph to help us quickly find information, and how when we solved the bar graph first, it helped us quickly see the data instead of having to do it every time. Tonight, for your work, we are going to be looking at 2 workbook pages. The first workbook page, you'll notice that the bars are going horizontally, which looks a little different than what we were doing before. The first thing I want you to look at when you're reading a bar graph is the directions. This puts a context to it. We know what the data is about. So this bar graph shows the number of eggs Lindsay sold from Monday to Friday. So you can see on my axis over here, I've got the days of the week. And then on this axis down here, I have the scale with the number of eggs. So it goes up to 1,000, and it looks like each one of these lines is 100. So, if this is 0 and this is 100, what's right in the middle? 50. Good. So this means 50. What's right in the middle of 100 and 200? 150. So that makes this one 250, this one 350, this one 450, this one 550. And then look what I did here. You'll notice that I put a line. You might want to do that when you're doing this, just so you can make sure you're following the correct line down. So I noticed that Friday, by drawing a line, was 650 eggs. So feel free to use the tools or use your pencil to create lines. Let's go through this. How many eggs did Lindsay sell on most days? So you want to think we've got Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. Most days. Are there any days that have a similar amount? Are there any days where they sold the same amount? And what day or what number of eggs is that? She sold how many more eggs on Friday than Thursday? So look at this. You're going to compare Friday to Thursday. Think about it like a bar model. What's the difference between the two? The most eggs she sold on any one day is, so you're going to find the longest bar. And the fewest eggs she sold on one day was, you're going to find the shortest bar. Let's look at page 143. Remember to read the context. This is t shirts sold by Mr. Cohen, Monday through Friday. It says, on which day did Mr. Cohen sell the greatest number of t shirts? So we can use the bars and look for their height. How many t shirts did he sell on Wednesday? That's when we're going to have to look at our axis over here with our scale. And you'll notice the scale is going up by fives. So each one of these little lines is going to be equal to one. So one shirt, two shirts, three shirts, four shirts, five shirts. So when you're reading this graph, make sure you follow those little dotted lines to help you and count carefully. The one I want to talk about is E. If the t shirts were sold at $8 each, how much did Mr. Cohen collect from the sale of the t shirts? So he sells every single one of the t shirts that he sold that week for $8. What do I have to find first? I have to find how many t shirts he sold that week. So you're going to have to do some big adding today. You're going to have to add Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday all together and find out how many t shirts he sold. And then you're going to have to find out if he sold each of those for $8, how much did he make in all? So then you're going to have to multiply it by 8 to find the total sale. All right, third graders? So, boys and girls, look carefully at scales. Look closely if the bar is horizontal or vertical. And read closely and remember to put your total on top. It'll help you with your questions along the way. Good luck, third graders.